This segment of DelmarvaLife is sponsored by TidalHealth.
It's a feeling of excitement every kid has as they peek out the window to see the sight of freshly fallen snow covering the neighborhood in a sea of white beauty. The hills are simply transformed into steep, sleddable slopes, and that snow is turned into frozen ammunition that, well, like revenge, it's best served up cold.
Oh yeah, and Jimmy, don't forget about building a snowman. Yes, it's always great to have good snowman snow. But with all the fun we see our children have, we might forget about the safety risks that come with playing in a cold temperature environment.
So, how can we ensure our children's safety in the snow? With us this afternoon via Zoom is Sarah Arnett, who's the president of Your Doc's In partnership with TidalHealth. How are you this afternoon?
I am doing well. How are you guys today?
Wonderful.
Great.
It's good to see you. So the kids are itching to go outside. Are there some key safety elements we should keep in mind before we send them out?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things before you let your kids go outside in the snow or the cold weather is just to make sure they're dressed appropriately and know where they're going to be playing. Do you have any hazards that could be covered up by the snow, or there big holes, or there bodies of water like ponds or things like that that might be covered up by the snow that they are forgetting that are there, and that could fall in or cause them some type of harm?
Yeah. Okay, so I remember when I was a kid, we would go out and we would play in the snow until we couldn't feel our toes or our fingers. Obviously, you don't want your kids to get that cold. How long is too long to be out in the cold?
Well, I think it certainly depends. I have not read or been told of any defined time limits about kids being outside. But one thing to remember that's very significant is that children are more susceptible to the cold weather than adults are. Their bodies are smaller, so they lose heat more quickly, and they certainly can get cold a lot faster than adults can. So the golden rule would be to check with your kids quite often, make sure they're still wearing the appropriate clothing that you sent them outside in. I know when I was little, you get hot and you take your coat off and your hat off because you're sweating and you feel hot. But that's actually one of the worst things they can do because it exposes their skin to the cold. So you want to make sure they're still dressed appropriately. You want to check the wind chill. We've had a lot of windy weather around our area lately, which can certainly make it a lot colder than what the actual air temperature would be. And that exposes their skin to becoming colder and potential frostbite much more quickly than if it was a little bit warmer. Yeah. Also, too, if it's actively snowing or sleeting or raining, their clothes are going to get wet much more quickly, which can cause challenges keeping them warm as well if their clothes are wet. And so you want to enforce indoor break times. You want to allow them to rest, probably have to force them to rest if they're having a good time. Change their clothes into dry clothing and make sure they get something to eat.
Let them dry out, warm up, and eat. What would you say are the most common injuries from kids playing outside in the snow?
Oh, the most common injuries typically related to falling, slipping and falling, or falling off a sled, if they're climbing on something that's slippery and they fall. So some bruising, sprains and strains, fractures, unfortunately, are pretty common. When there's multiple kids playing together, you often see head injuries from them crashing into each other or striking their heads against equipment, sporting equipment, or their heads against each other's heads. So you want to make sure that, if they're playing certain sports outside, they have protective gear. If they're sledding, that they're being conscientious of the kids that are around them and trees and other obstacles that they could crash into. And if it's icy, just please remind them repeatedly that it's icy and that they need to be careful when they're walking so that they don't fall.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you bring up the ice, and you also mentioned the ice on ponds, staying away from ponds. Yes. Do you think that kids really understand the dangers with
I don't. I look back to when I was little, and you feel like, okay, if I tap it with my finger, it's icy and it's strong and it's safe. It's not, probably. In our area, our ponds and river bodies of water do not typically freeze that deeply to make it safe for ice skating or even coming down a hill from a sled onto the water like that. So parents should be very, very aware of what kind of water is around them and when their kids are going to be playing outside, because most likely it's not going to be frozen enough to hold them for very long.
Sarah Arnett with Your Doc's In, thank you so much for taking some time with us this afternoon.
My pleasure. Have a great afternoon.
You do the same.
Thank you.
The snow, huh? Okay.